The Dallas Mavericks made the Western Conference Finals. But let's talk about what that means for this upcoming season, because it's not the same team. Different things are happening. We've got a lot to talk about. Michael Bolton.
Thanks, Josh. It's Michael Bolton here, and it's time for another episode of the Locked On Fantasy Basketball Podcast. Let's get to it.
Let's get to it, indeed.
You are Locked On Fantasy, your daily NBA fantasy podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Fantasy Basketball Podcast, brought to you by Basketball Monster. My name is Josh Lloyd, and I wish I held the Olympic torch. I'm also the lead fantasy analyst at basketballmonster.com, and you can find me on Twitter, as always, at redrock_bball, on TikTok at redrock_bball, and on Instagram at LockedOnFantasyBasketball. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, use the code LockedOnNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Thank you also for making Locked On Fantasy Basketball your first listen every day. We are free. We're available on all platforms, so give it a double bang, a single bang, a thumb up, all that stuff. Drop that in there, and it'll be awesome. Now, we're going to talk Dallas Mavericks. So let's do it. So, of course, to talk about the Dallas Mavericks, I have to bring in the host of the Locked On Mavericks podcast, who had like a great season for the Mavericks last season. Yeah, surprising stuff, especially Nick Angstadt comes, especially like last season. We did this preview, and I can't remember if it was on air or off air, but you told me, man, what a season. We've got this fat, lazy European who can't be bothered. We've got a flat earth loser from Australia. This is going to be an absolute disaster. And here we are now. Look at us. Who could have thought that we would be here, Nick, with a Western Conference finalist or Western Conference champion Dallas Mavericks team, despite all those horrible things you said about the team?
Josh Green is not a flat earther, Josh.
I should have said a flat earther from Melbourne, because Josh Green's from Sydney, so we would have had that
right.
nice little differentiation here. But this was a surprise, obviously, because we talked last season, we didn't know what was going to be happening with this team, and the team is very different, even to the team that we previewed at the start of last season, with all the mid-season trades that seemed to kickstart a bunch of things for this Mavericks squad. That gives us just a great opportunity to see what they've done now in this offseason. Not as busy as what they did in season, but they didn't sit on their hands. Nico Harrison's making moves, and we've got guys coming in. Klay Thompson, Najee Marshall, Quentin Grimes, the prodigal son, Spencer Dinwiddie, is back. I'm sure you're thrilled about that. And Kessler Edwards comes in on a two-way. But obviously, those first four names there, I would expect Thompson, Marshall, Grimes, and Dinwiddie up parts of the rotation every night.
Yeah, I think there's a chance that Dinwiddie could be like we'll see what happens between him, Exum, and Hardy. I would imagine early on Dinwiddie gets the nod, but I mean, looking at some of the way he played with the Lakers, you're like, all right, he's not a guaranteed like, all right, he's in the rotation every night if one of those other guys steps up. But yeah, you'd think that those guys are part of the rotation.
I asked all the hosts who the biggest addition was for their team coming in, and Nick, I was starting to prepare the graphic, right? I was starting to do this and think, all right, so I've just done the Warriors one, so I'll just reuse the Klay Thompson graphic. You go, nah, it's not Klay Thompson. The biggest addition here is Najee Marshall, which is really interesting because there were obviously concerns as my graphic just did not appear there on the right screen. It's, user error. It's going to come up now. Najee Marshall is your guy because Klay was struggling at many times last season. I'm going to just ask you this question here. Do you think that you've put Najee here as the biggest addition? Do you think he's going to close games over Klay?
I think there's a chance where he could, for sure. And I think that Najee Marshall is a big addition because they need, if the Klay Thompson thing defensively does not work out well for them, they're going to need somebody to throw into that spot. And I think one of the reasons why the Mavericks have been great, in 2022, they made the Western Conference Finals. In 2024, they made the NBA Finals. They had the two dirty work wings. They had the Reggie Bullock, Dorian Finney-Smith combo, and then they had the Derrick Jones Jr., PJ Washington combo. And Klay Thompson, I'm expecting him to be great, to add to the defense or to add to the offense, to help them with 3-point shooting. And obviously, like I've been looking at Luka led the Mavericks in 3-point attempts every season except for his rookie year for like the last 14 games or something like that. I mean, he's just been their only guy that takes volume threes. And so now you have Klay to bring in and do that. And obviously Klay's going to make a big impact. He probably should be the guy that's the biggest addition. But to me, I think Najee Marshall at least gives you one of those other dirty work wings. And that's been a formula that's just worked so well for the Dallas Mavericks that it was so big that they replaced him, because if they replaced Derrick Jones Jr., because if they didn't replace him at all or just replaced him with Klay, then all of a sudden there's a lot asked on Klay defensively. And I think now with Najee, there isn't as much asked on him.
I think that's, obviously Klay is the bigger name and he's the guy that's going to take more shots. But you're right. Like, losing, like, if you added Najee Marshall and didn't lose Derrick Jones, then who cares? Like, that's not that big of addition. That's not that important, right? But when you lose Derrick Jones and then Najee Marshall is vital, because we're not expecting that Omax Prosper is going to step up into a larger role on this team. And we've seen that there can be issues with Klay, who's a relatively high usage player, trying to fit with two other relatively high usage players, or not relatively, like insanely high usage players. That isn't always the formula that works. So it is key. And I think there are going to be games where Klay isn't playing 33 minutes a night, that there'll be other opportunities or other guys who do fit in. Then we mentioned Dinwiddie. You talked about Exum, who shot like 48% on threes last season. We'll talk about him a little bit later on. Jaden Hardy for a little bit of a boost as well. It gives them a little bit of flexibility. Now, Najee is not going to do huge amounts. He's not going to play 34 minutes. He's not going to score 20 points. He might score 20 points across an entire week if he's lucky. But just doing those little things, I agree that is really, really important for where this team wants to go. And we know where they want to go. Now, in terms of the guys they lost, Tim Hardaway Jr., Josh Green, Derrick Jones Jr., education reform legend Markieff Morris, and Alex Fudge is out of there. Again, we talk about 4 guys coming into the rotation. There's 3 guys there that are out, like Hardaway, Green, and Jones. But Hardaway started out red hot last season and then was terrible for most of the year after that. Had, I think, one good game in the playoffs. But Derrick Jones is probably the bigger one. Well, not I say probably, but like you've definitely told me that he is the biggest loss on this team just because of the way that he was able to perform second half of the season. But Nick, I was going back and having a look. When we did this show last year, he wasn't even on the team. They hadn't even signed Derrick Jones at that point in the season last year. He was like a late addition. We go, what sort of minutes is he going to get? Where's he going to play? But eventually he moved into that role. I don't think we need to harp on how they're replacing Derrick Jones, because we've already talked about that. But what about that bench group also then of losing Josh Green and losing Tim Hardaway? Like, do you think the additions have more than made up for that?
Yeah, you look at the 3 main additions, I guess, that they made even before the Dinwiddie one, and you go, okay, well, Klay Thompson is the upgrade over Tim Hardaway Jr.
Yep.
You go, Najee Marshall and Derrick Jones Jr., that maybe evens out. That seems, to some Mavs fans, be like, oh, Derrick Jones was so great. But you're right. Like, he was a minimum guy that came in, was playing 14 minutes a game for the Bulls. Like, he wasn't breaking their rotation some nights. And Najee Marshall was playing 19 minutes a game on a playoff Pelicans team. So, and he shot 38% from 3 last year. So he's coming in at a higher level than where Derrick Jones Jr. was coming in last season. So it wouldn't surprise me if Najee Marshall is better than what Derrick Jones Jr. was in different areas, but was better. And then Quentin Grimes, I think, comes in and is the potential upgrade for Josh Green. I think he can be that, because we've seen him at least start and be good on a Knicks team that was a playoff team a couple years ago, and to guard the best player on the other team a lot of nights. And so you look at those 3 guys, you're like, all right, well, all 3 of them across the board, you can make an argument that they upgraded. Then you add Dinwiddie on there, which is probably the upgrade over Exum or Hardy or their non-third point guard having roster last year, which they just didn't have for the whole season. And so you do all that and you go, all right, well, I think this team took a step forward.
I agree with nearly all of that, because I think Quentin Grimes has got a ton of potential. My worry about Grimes is the knee. Like the fact that the Pistons said, please, we'll take Tim Hardaway and really not much else and give you a young, promising player, it makes me somewhat worried. Now, to push that to the other side and give you the positive side of it, I had heard that Quentin Grimes was like, I need to get back to Texas. I don't want to be here. I want to go back home. So, and Detroit's like, okay, we've got a million other guys in this spot. You can do that. So I think maybe that sort of alleviates some of my worry about the knee. But it's 2 years ago, he was like guarding Jimmy Butler one-on-one in the playoffs and doing it really, really well. And then last season, it all just turned to shit and his knee was all over the place. Like it was bad. We hope that he's able to get back to that level, because he would be a really interesting player and a very clear upgrade, I think, over Josh Green. As you said, we're going to get back and talk about more stuff. Nick, sorry to cut you off, because I've got to tell you that today's episode is brought to you by eBay Motors. And the Dallas Mavericks would know that one of the ingredients for championships is passion. One of them might be drive. One of them might be patience. One of them might be having Luka Doncic, but I don't think eBay Motors sells that as a part of their 122 million different parts that are available for their cars, or as they would call it, their ride or die. So plenty of Mavs fans ride or die for Luka Doncic. But I don't think they're buying a supercharger to install into him. But you can do that for your car. Everything is available over at eBay Motors. In fact, whatever part it is that you need, they're going to have that there for you. So go ahead, check everything that's available. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, you've got that peace of mind, that security, that whatever the part is, it's going to fit your car. Because if it doesn't fit, you get your money back. With eBay Motors, you are burning rubber and not cash. So go ahead and check out everything to keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply, and eBay Guaranteed Fit is only available to US customers because all right, Nick, let's talk as you just die there, as I kill us. I'll cut that out. It's all good. We're here.
Lose advertising over here.
We're here to talk about the projected starting group, and I don't really think there is any debate about this grouping. It's Luka, it's Kyrie, it's Klay, it's PJ, except when we get to the center spot. Now, you have come out and said it's going to be Derek Lively the second. And I agree with you wholeheartedly, except there was a lot of confusion, I thought, around what happened at the trade deadline. And I'll spell it out for people who aren't aware. They traded for Daniel Gafford, and Daniel Gafford was having a pretty good season in Washington. So if those of us in the fantasy world were looking at that going, it's a little bit frustrating, but we'll see how it all goes. I think that Gafford is the guy they probably want to rely upon heading into the playoffs. And then everyone came out. Doncic came out and Kidd came out and go, man, so good to trade for a backup center. I went, hang on, what's going on now? That's a little interesting. And then he came off the bench and played like 17 minutes a night. And then went on one of the all-time heaters and didn't miss a shot for about 3 consecutive months. And he was the starter and getting big minutes. But we also saw, Nick, as the playoffs went on, I think it's inarguable that Daniel Gafford was outplayed by Derek Lively all through that postseason. So is that where you're leaning with this? Because again, this was switched after the trade. Gafford started all of the regular season. I think he started most of the playoffs anyway. But he was outplayed through that second half of the in the postseason.
Yeah, we've seen Kidd do this before in the past, have like that, the starting center, the quote unquote, like the memorial starting center spot. Dwight Powell started every single game in the 2022 playoffs. And then Maxi Kleber would come in and play center for most of the game after that. And Dwight would play like 10, 12 minutes or something like that. And so Kidd may do that. It may be about fit. It may be about just starting, but Lively's going to be the one that plays the most minutes. He's going to be the one that closes games at times if they do close with the center. And man, you're right. He took a huge step forward, and it's amazing that a rookie center played as much as he did on a 50-win team. It's amazing that a rookie center played as much as he did on a playoff team, the team that went to the finals. And to find a player like that, a rookie center, lottery rookie center, that was a 16-game player that you could play and trust in those big moments was absolutely insane. The run that Derek Lively had was absolutely insane. He became the Mavs' third most important player in that playoff run. And so to not start that guy or to not have that guy be the main center on your team, I think would be kind of insane. And so we'll see what happens. Maybe Kidd just goes with fit to start games, but Lively will play more. Because
I think about you all the time, Nick, I'm thinking back to when we had that show last season and we talked about Derek Lively. We said, hey, it is so unlikely that a team that has playoff aspirations that just, you did the research. You went and go, tried to look back and I could not find a rookie center who got meaningful minutes or started games on a team that was pushing for conference finals. And that's what we said. And we didn't think he'd be that guy. And then first preseason game, Derek Lively starting. We're like, okay, hang on. Now, to be fair, they started Prosper as well. And then he played about 20 minutes combined for the rest of the season. But that was sort of out of nowhere. We had no inclination that this would be the way that they were leaning, and Lively sort of exceeded any sort of benchmarks or posts of what we thought he could do through the year. And again, what we saw in the playoffs, we have to expect that there is probably a new level here. I'd say the only worry there with Lively is anytime he sort of started to push forward during the season, there seemed to be an injury that befell him, and that's really what gave Gafford that opportunity to step into that larger role. Because again, after he was traded, he played 17 minutes a night, Gafford, and then guys went down, he played big minutes, and they didn't take him out. So I guess that's maybe the worry, but you're in the situation now where you've still got Dwight Powell, you've still got Maxi Kleber, and you've still got Daniel Gafford. So what was a weakness at the start of last season, it's not necessarily a relative strength, but it's not far off it.
Oh, you feel amazing at this, but this is one of the best we've felt about a center rotation since probably Tyson Chandler in 2015, maybe 2011 with Tyson Chandler and Daniel Dallenberg there, like that, or Brendan Haywood there at that spot. Dallenberg, wow, that was a. I had to reach back into he got cut from the training camp team on the Mavs like 1 year.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah. You mentioned you mentioned Lively and a rookie center playing. He didn't actually hit 25 minutes, but the research that I did before was Lively was on track to be the first rookie center to play on a playoff team since Al Horford in 2008, like to play 25 minutes a night, which is insane. And then before that, first one on a team above 500, a rookie center. Yao Ming, 2003.
Well, that's it. Yeah. So look, when we're talking about this stuff, we're trying to play the odds and also what's the likely scenario to happen? And he obviously broke through that, and we don't have to worry about likely scenarios now because we sort of know what Derek Lively at least has given us as a baseline, and then where we can go from there. Now, the bench grouping again, we've mentioned all these guys already: Dinwiddie, Grimes, Marshall, Kleber, and Gafford. Let me just ask a quick question about Maxi Kleber. Why can't he shoot anymore? Well, he used to be like this, he defends the rim, he shoots threes, but is it just the knees and the injuries? I don't feel good about him shooting at all at this point.
Yeah, I don't either. And with him, every time he's down with an injury, like you said, every time he goes down, he comes back and he's a little bit more skittish about taking those shots. And you just wish that, all right, just be confident in your shot, take it. And maybe it's knees, maybe it's something, but there's something about coming back from injuries that every time that happens, he gets stuck. But then you see the Max that we saw in the first round against the Clippers. You go, all right, well, that's the guy that they need, that 3-point shooting center. And his defense in the last 2 months of the season was really, really good. I mean, one of the reasons why the Mavs were as good as they were defensively is they had him to throw in off the bench, to play next to Gafford, to play next to Lively, to play at 5 sometimes and still play credible defense that can switch and defend the rim a little bit and do all that. And so, I mean, he was good at times last year, but then by the end of the playoffs, you had Mavs fans that were like, all right, the two things that the Mavs need to do in the offseason is get rid of Tim Hardaway Jr. and get rid of Maxi Kleber. And you're like, okay, well, fans are going that far with it at a certain point. Then, his play was a little rough there at the end.
Yeah, he's been there with these guys who you think, oh, this is really good. He's a useful piece. And you go, my God, this guy never sees the court again. And then he's so back. And then it's so over. It's all over the shop with what he is bringing or not bringing at a certain time. Now, this is the part of the show where I look at what a key injury update. There's nothing major, but I do think it is a little bit maybe misremembered. Not even misremembered, Nick, but Kyrie's got a broken hand or something going on at the moment. Now, we don't think there's any problem with this heading into next season, but this also just gives me a nice excuse to talk about Kyrie Irving. But there's no worries about his hand and being ready for camp or anything like that, is there?
No worries about that.
Now, Kyrie came across after the trade. There was so many people. Kyrie killed the Mavs. He ruined everything about them. And I'm also pretty sure we talked about this last season. It said that when Kyrie came over, things were fine offensively. It wasn't that. It was that they lost all of those garbage men, all those defensive players, the Bullocks, the Finney Smith, the guys that enabled those players to do that. And that's got, Kyrie's not coming in to be Derek White or to be Marcus Smart. Like, that's not what he's there for. It was the way that the roster was constructed that caused those problems when he arrived, because the offensive stuff, totally okay. And then we saw that actually play out this season. With Kyrie and that pairing with Luka, do you think that there was anything that they need to do differently, or is there a way that it could have been better, or you think that this is just like the perfect way that it all panned out for them?
Yeah, I think they went to the finals. I mean, like, how could it have gone better than that? But I think that there are certain instances where you saw the limitations of just having two guys that can dribble the ball at times on the court. I mean, against the Thunder, Kyrie struggled at times because they could put multiple guys on him, and they're like, all right, Luka, you go beat a guy one-on-one, but we're just going to put extra attention on Kyrie, and he's not going to beat us. And then all of a sudden now, what are you going to do then? Like, who are you going to throw to then? Who's going to make an extra move there? And so they started to go to PJ Washington, and he hit a bunch of threes, but he also attacked off the dribble, and he also posted up Shea, and he also did some extra stuff here and there. And so that's where they looked at their release valve there. So now maybe with Klay Thompson, the thing that Luka and Kyrie can do a little bit better is maybe they'll have a third guy to be that release valve, to be an extra guy that can attack, to be an extra guy that they can run a play for. They didn't have anybody else to run a play for besides Luka and Kyrie, or a lob. Like, that was the only things that they could even go to their playbook and set up. And so I think that Klay will come in and help Kyrie do some of those things, because, I mean, the Boston stuff in the finals, inexplicable how terrible he played in Boston compared to how he played in Dallas. Maybe that we just chalk it up to mentally, but he also struggled against the Thunder to get his shot going, to get a shot because of the way that the defense was, attracted to him, put attention on him. And so I hope that Klay will come in and be that fix for them, because that's what they needed.
So my takeaway I'm getting from that, Nick, is that the Dallas Mavericks, like all of us, have been searching for a third for a long time. They've got one now in Klay Thompson, and we'll see how that plays out. What do we need to look at now? It's a good question. What we do need to go to actually now is to talk about who the player to watch is for this upcoming season. Nick, your guy on this list was Paul Washington Jr., because he came across in one of those trades that the Mavs did across the trade deadline, and Thunder fans will know that he is the greatest shooter of all time. Everyone else will know that he's PJ Washington, who is literally, I would say, since the demise of Jay Crowder as a regular rotation player, there is not someone who is more inconsistent in the entire NBA over the last 3 years. This is what he does. He'll go 31, 31, 32%, 48, 48, 40, 30 points with 7 blocks and then 4 points and 3 rebounds on 10 attempts. And you go, bro, like, you can't rely upon any of this. And he did it again. This is just what PJ does. So you've said he's the player to watch. Why?
Think about a starting lineup with Luka, Kyrie, Klay. Okay, incredible spacing with those 3 guys, incredible attacking, incredible just playmaking. Then you have your lob threat, whether it's Gafford or we think Lively. You have the lob threat there. Then you have your vertical spacing. You have all this spacing, all this attention going to those 4 guys in vertical, 3-point shooting, attacking, multiple defenders going at Luka and Kyrie. And then what's PJ Washington going to be doing? Right? He's like the 5th man out there. And at most times this season, he's going to have the 4th best defender, perimeter defender on him at all times. This is probably this whole season if Luka, Kyrie, and Klay are out there. And so can he take advantage of that? Can he take advantage of the open threes? The Mavs have been working on reworking his shot this offseason, helping him to get better at that. And so that's going to be huge for them if he can be a consistent 3-point shooter. Like you said, he's just been inconsistent all over the place, but it's kind of been because of his opportunity. He got a ton of opportunity against the Thunder in a way he didn't against Minnesota necessarily. And so he had to attack differently. But I think with this new roster with Klay now, I mean, he's going to get a bunch of open shots, a bunch of opportunities to take on the 4th best defender on the other team. And I think that he's a guy to watch to see, all right, if he takes a step forward and all of a sudden he starts doing a little bit more, they're able to trust him a little bit more, then who are you doubling off of? It's probably still PJ, but if he takes a step forward, then he's going to make you pay.
Yeah, I think people have been waiting for that for PJ for a while now. And I guess there is a flip side of that, is that if PJ is open and doing more, that he could do more and miss more shots and become one of those guys who go, look at me, I'm going to get a few shots up here, and then he goes 1 of 9 from 3 and then stalls out the offense because he thinks I've got the matchup, I've got the mismatch, let me go at it. And that's, again, it is going to be just about working that consistency. I thought he was much better in Dallas than he was in Charlotte, but there was still a lot of the old PJ that was there in terms of the numbers. It is going to be probably harder for him, I would expect, this season to get the same level of usage that he got, because you're replacing Josh Green or Derek Jones with Klay Thompson in all of those minutes, and that is obviously just a different change in the hierarchy of how the ball gets distributed. But he is an interesting player who's always going to have that opportunity to go off and always have the opportunity to completely kill you by some terrible shooting performance. Your make or break player is an interesting one, because Dante Exum had been out of the NBA for a long time. Really the last we'd seen of him was getting absolutely suplexed into the floor by Gershon Yabusele over at EuroLeague. Then came across to Dallas and went bananas. And like I said, he shot 49% from 3 and just couldn't miss. Sank the Lakers in that early season game and was a key part of their rotation. But then it did start to fizzle out, I guess, as the season went on. There's no way he's going to be able to shoot that number. Don't care who you are, he's not going to continue to do that. And I think when I look at his role on this squad, played 20 minutes a night last season, I find it really hard to see how he gets there unless there are significant long-term injuries.
That's the thing with him, is that he was such an important piece. I mean, in that December stretch, when Kyrie was out, when he missed a bunch of time, he came in and scored 20 points a couple of times and was able to be the 3rd ball handler at times, or even the 2nd one next to Luka, next to Kyrie. hit a bunch of threes. They legitimately would not have won like 4 games last season without. They would have been a 46-win team and not a 50-win team without Dante Exum. That's how important he was at times last year, and just hitting game-winning shots, scoring down the stretch. He had that crazy 3 that he hit to put the Houston game into overtime late in the season last year. I mean, just some crazy stuff that happened with him. And then we go into the playoffs, and he's just not that guy at all. And he just looks scared of the moment. It didn't seem like he was ready for it. And so you go, okay, well, now what do you do? And so now Jason Kidd has to make a decision. All right, do I invest in this guy again, in any regular season time, thinking that he may do the exact same thing in the playoffs if we make it again, and all of a sudden he's not there again? Or do I put all that time and all that attention into Dinwiddie, to Hardy, trying to bring Hardy along and just playing Dinwiddie because now he's back and we know what to expect from him. And so, so that's why he's a make or break guy, because the minutes are not necessarily there, and he wasn't in the NBA the year before last. And in the playoffs, he just really shrunk from the moment. And I think that it's a big season coming up for him.
And you could talk about Najee Marshall's playing the 3 on the bench unit. If Quentin Grimes is healthy, he's there, and Spencer Dinwiddie's there, so he just might not play minutes. And then there is the ascension of the potential ascension of Jaden Hardy, who is a guy that can create his own shot, who can dribble the ball, which so many of these other guys can't. And maybe that's a way that Kidd has to go and get more minutes for Jaden Hardy. So while it was a great story to see Dante Exum back, he did then suffer some injuries again and struggled in the playoffs. And it just feels like it might have been that was the chance. He did what he needed to do at that specific point in time. And now, where do we take it from here? And it is it's a little bit hard to try and figure out how it all fits in. The major storyline, I think, for this season, Nick, for this Mavericks team, I don't know. I don't think it's particularly complicated. It's just about what constitutes success. And we saw them make the conference finals 2022, not get back there. They go one step further this year. Is the conference finals a success? Is it NBA finals? Is it championship? Where are they in their sort of development pathway?
Yeah, you'd probably ask most Mavs fans, and they say, if they don't make it back to the finals, it's not a successful season. Well, it's so hard to make the NBA finals now, right? Especially in the West with all the competition you have. So to me, I think if they make it back to the Western Conference Finals, that's a successful season. You've got back. You didn't necessarily take a step back. You won a couple of playoff rounds. I think there's maybe a case that they have a competitive second round series and lose to the eventual champion if it's the Nuggets or whoever. I think you could make a case that was a successful season if guys take steps forward, Lively and whoever. But it is kind of all right, this is the team now. They have some assets. They'll have some firsts, and they'll have some young guys and stuff. But this is your team. You've put a lot into this team. Nico Harrison has completely transformed this roster. Going into last season, I just did the episode that I do every year. Who's the Mavs' third best player? Well, it's Luka, Kyrie, then who else? Our answer last season was Grant Williams.
Jeez, yeah,
that was our answer. And now we're talking about, is it Klay? Is it Lively? Could it be PJ? Who else could step up into that? And now we have 3 answers that are completely different than that, and better options and answers than they were with Grant Williams. So this team is they're ready to compete now. They went to the NBA Finals. They beat 2 of the top 3 teams in the West last year. They're ready to go right now. So I wouldn't hold it against somebody if they said they've got to make the finals again, because they proved that they just did it, and Luka wasn't healthy, and they were starting a rookie center, or they were playing a rookie center a lot of minutes, and they had some holes still, and now Klay comes in, and we talked about how they upgraded. And so, you get better after making the finals, then maybe you should make the finals again.
You probably should, but like you said, it is tough to get back there. I think one of the burning questions for me, or my one major burning question on this team, Nick, is regarding Klay Thompson, because there is a chance that he is washed. There were plenty of times that I would play the washed watch graphic on my screen because he was just bad. Now, he had a nice stretch January onwards where he shot the ball better, but so many of the things that made Klay, like the defensive ability, the some of the driving stuff, just that force wasn't there. He still shot the ball well, but there was just too many. Well, let's be honest, there was too many PJ Washington games where he would go 1 of 8, and we saw it in the playoffs where he struggled. And the Warriors obviously wouldn't pony up any sort of big level contract for him. That to me is the real worry here, is that he just might be done as a starting caliber player. That's probably going a little bit too far, but that has to be at least sort of nagging in the back of Mavs fans' minds.
Yeah, it's a possibility that he's there. I mean, he's the oldest guy on the roster, so he's coming over. He's had these 2 terrible injuries in his career back to back. Guys don't usually return very good off of those, but he averaged 18 points a game last year and shot 38%, and that was a down year for him. So like we've seen some production from him at least. And I think what the Mavericks are going to ask is different than what the Warriors are going to ask. The Mavericks are going to put him in a system where a bunch of open threes are going to be created for him. He's not going to have to run around a bunch of screens, run 4 miles a game or whatever the hell like the hustle stat used to be that he used to run the most in the NBA. They're not going to ask him to do that. They also don't want him to have to try and create all the time. They've got 2 guys that do that at an elite level. And so all the plays that the Warriors fans were frustrated about last year was like, why is Klay trying to create off the dribble and trying to take these contested 2-point jumpers and things like that? He's not going to be asked to do that as much. Maybe he can do it every once in a while. But on offense, I think he's in a really good situation. On defense, this is going to be the big question for the Mavericks. Replacing Derrick Jones Jr. and saying they went from Derrick Jones Jr. to Najee is great. Saying they went from Tim Hardaway Jr. upgrading to Klay Thompson is great. But you can only start one of them if you're going to start the other 4 guys we mentioned. And so you start Klay, and now all of a sudden, all right, you don't have your dirty work wings because Klay Thompson is not necessarily that defender anymore. But in the Mavericks scheme, where it's a lot of rotating, it's a lot of communicating, it's a lot of switching and things like that, if Klay can just be credible in his spot, then I think they can be okay. But that's the same with Luka. That's the same with Kyrie. And then you're like, all right, you're asking Lively to do a lot on the back end. You're asking PJ Washington to do a lot on the perimeter. Can they all hold up their own end of the bargain in this defense? Or will it collapse because they've got 3 guys on the perimeter that you can't put on one of the best players on the other team? Ooh, that is an issue. And to me, that's why Najee Marshall is one of the most important players they added.
Yeah, agree. Now, I'm about to say something really, really smart here, Nick, so just be ready for it, because basketball is about, and the NBA it's about context really specifically, because we can sit here and go, Klay Thompson is a better player than Derrick Jones, and he's a better player than Tim Hardaway, and his 2K rating is 87, and these guys are a 79 or whatever. But that doesn't matter, because Klay was playing in Golden State as the number 2 offensive option. So he was required to do a lot of this self-creating stuff, which is what you said. But he comes across to Dallas now, and he is not the number 2 guy, and he's not even close to the number 2 guy, meaning that the other parts of his game are what need to step up and sustain his role and his value. And that's, I think, where the worry is. He still might be a 39, a 40% three-point shooter. He still might be that guy. But he's not going to be relied upon as much for his offense. He's going to have to fill in the other spaces there where there might be a player, maybe like Dante Exum, someone with length and say less injury history, but not really. But someone who does something just differently, because you don't need the secondary creator the way that Klay was. You need him to do some of the old Klay stuff. And that's, I think, where it's very easy to say, Klay, legend, we love all this stuff that he does. But like you highlighted, it's not the same role. It's not the same Klay, but it's not the same role. And we don't need him to do the same things. And the worry is that the things that you might need him to do are the things he's fallen off more in versus the things that we all know that Klay still can do at a certain level. And I think that's the big question for me, is how that all plays out over the course of this season.
Yeah, this is gonna be the biggest test of Jason Kidd, I think, this season.
Yep.
Because now he's got, all right, he started with just Luka, and the second best player was Spencer Dinwiddie, right, to start like the 2022 season. You're like, okay, after you lose Brunson, now it was those 2 guys. You're starting with basically nothing. Okay, then you add Kyrie. All right, now you got to manage these 2 egos and figure out how these guys play together. Worked out really well. They made the finals. Those guys play really well together. They, made the NBA finals together and were, brotherly and all that kind of stuff. Great. Now all of a sudden you introduce Klay Thompson. Okay, he's coming in saying, all right, we want to win a championship. I know what sacrifice looks like. He's coming to a new wants to do a new thing with the Dallas Mavericks. Okay, now you got to manage that. You also bring in Spencer Dinwiddie, who's used to being a guy that plays a lot for the Mavericks, and maybe he doesn't play a lot. He's got all these egos now all of a sudden that he's going to have to manage, and I think that's going to be the test of Jason Kidd. They have enough talent and skills to cover all the things that the Mavericks need. Now he's just got to put the right pieces in the right spots.
But Nick, he's just there watching like all of us anyway. So I can't expect too much from Jason Kidd. He's just there watching.
I'm playing. I'm watching, just like you guys.
Exactly, Jason. I think that is underrated because, by all reports, Klay was miserable in the locker room. He infected.
Right.
He infected. And I don't want to say that he was a cancer, but he infected everybody in that team with his attitude. He said it. He said, "Look, I was just like down the whole year," and Yeah, you also bring back notoriously good bloke that everyone loves after he leaves, Spencer Dinwiddie. Like everyone loves Spencer Dinwiddie after he leaves their team. It's just the vibes are always immaculate, and yeah, you've got to try and manage that sort of stuff. Imagine they bring Kyle Kuzma in now as well with Spencer Dinwiddie there. I just thought about that.
Kyle Kuzma turned down the trade to the Mavs. So imagine that he did that after he turned it down.
Oh my god, would have been hilarious. Asking the hosts, Nicholas, about the bold prediction this upcoming season, and I do like your one. It is Derek Lively will make an all-defense team. They're obviously positionless, so we can go with more centers. That, to me, suggests that you're looking at Derek Lively as a guy that might be playing 28 minutes a night or so, because I don't think you're making an all-defense team if you're not pushing up past 24 minutes. So is that what you're looking at?
Yeah, I hope so. I hope that he steps into that spot. It's a bold prediction, so you're looking at, all right, what's a thing that could happen that would be absolutely awesome? It'd be awesome if all of a sudden the Derek Lively we saw going through the playoffs was the Derek Lively that Jason Kidd goes, you know what? We need that guy playing 27, 28 minutes a night out there, defending, especially if they have the issues that we've been talking about with, all right, hold on, we're playing Luka, Kyrie, and a 35-year-old Klay Thompson on our defense, perimeter. We're going to need that elite, defender under the rim anytime those three are on the court at the same time. And Gafford really doesn't defend at the same level that Lively can, and switch at the same level that Lively can, or at all. And so I think Lively being in that conversation, I think there's a real case for Lively to be the third most important player for the Mavericks this season. We just talked about that on Locked On Mavs the other day. And so, yeah, I think Derek Lively making all defense, especially now that they allow as many centers as possible on there. I think it's definitely more plausible than it was a couple years ago. The
record prediction, Nick, for this team, again, their regular season record does not befit a usual NBA Finals team because we know the reasons. The big trades in the middle of the season to revamp the roster. So you've gone with 54 and 28. Where do you think that puts them in the Western Conference? They're aiming top 2, top 4. Where do you think that's putting them?
Yeah, well, 54 wins last season would have put them in 4th, and 2 seasons ago would have put them in 1st. So it's all right, what's the West gonna look like? To me, I think they slot in 3. I think it goes Oklahoma, probably Minnesota again, and then Dallas. I think Denver steps back a little bit. Because they really went for it at the end and ran out of gas. They also are going to be without KCP. They have less depth, all those reasons. And I think the Mavericks with their depth, take a step forward. I think they become the 3rd team in the West. And I think that's how the West will play out, at least at the top.
What do you think the downside risk is? 48 wins, playing, what if your thing's not if everything goes wrong, and we haven't even talked about Luka. Let's just talk about Luka now. How happy are you that the Slovenia didn't make the Olympics?
I was covering Slovenia games, the Olympic qualifier games on Locked On Mavs. I was happy to do it. I was happy that he was happy getting to do it, but man, he just looked really rough in some of those games. Just did not look healthy at all. And Mavs fans the whole time, every Olympic qualifying game, were saying, can this be over? Can this be over? Can he be done? I'm like, you can't ask a guy to not play for his country and have country pride and all that. But they did anyway. And then he didn't make it, and Mavs fans rejoiced. And I scolded them, but it is what it is. No,
well, he was through the World Cup, limping through the World Cup last year. Oh, yeah, last year. 23, he was limping through all that. Jeez, what's going to happen here? This is an unbelievable load on his body. And by the end, I thought that it might become more of a problem during the regular season, all that extra stuff where he just looked, even in those games, he just was limping around the Philippines every moment you saw him. Go, this is not good. And then we got to the finals, and then everything sort of there was just, he was clearly not right. And whether that's to do with whatever, it's just a lot of accumulation stuff. So to have another summer of that push through would have been pretty frustrating. So that's a good sign. But in terms of Luka, and people want to hear, he's Luka, he's got a shot for MVP. I don't see what major is changing. He is what he is. Nothing's really changing in that regard. You just hope that he stays healthy, Nick.
The one thing I'm looking at for Luka on the court is, does his usage drop a little bit on purpose because Klay Thompson comes in, takes a little bit because they want to play him a little less. I mean, they had stretches last year where he was playing 40 minutes a game in the regular season. I don't think they could do that again. If I was in Jason Kidd's ear, I'm like, hey, I know that he wants to play. You've got to put the hammer down. And hey, we cannot have you play 40 minutes in some of these random regular season games against, I don't know, the Charlotte Hornets or whoever else if the team's not playing well. And so there's that. And then the other thing with Luka is he shot the best he shot from 3 in his entire career. I mean, arguably, he was the second best 3-point shooter in the NBA last year. 10 threes a game he took, and he shot 38%. That was a little bit of an outlier, but is it going to be an outlier for his career? Does he shoot the same next year? Does he come back as the same guy? This is probably going to be the first time since 2000, since his rookie year, that he won't be the guy that leads the Mavericks in 3-point attempts. So we'll see if Klay Thompson takes 10 this year. And so that's one thing that I'm looking at with him is his threes.
Last part of the show, Nick, asking all of the hosts a quiz question. Luckily, you've been away, so you haven't been checking in on my shows as you do, like a little just snide hiding behind the door, just peeking in to see what I'm doing all the time. But you haven't done that this time. So I've got you here. We're in the 24-25 season. This is really simple. Who is the most memorable player that wore number 24 or number 25 for the Mavericks in your mind? There's no right or wrong answer. Just give me a name of someone who wore that number. There's not that many that actually did that for Dallas, but who's a name?
Didn't Chandler Parsons wear 25?
Yeah, he did. That's the second Chandler Parsons mention we've had so far. Like Joe brought him up on the Grizzlies, so Chandler Parsons getting the double dip mentions here. See if Jackson brings him up for Houston as well.
Yeah, Chandler Parsons for sure. The max or nothing mother effer. Like that was just such a legendary story for the Mavericks. The Tim McMahon story where that's what he said as he was peeling out of a club parking lot or whatever. A 24. There's definitely, I know every time you do this, there's one that you're like,
well, there hasn't been a number 24 on the Mavs, weirdly enough, for about 9 years, and there's only been 5 players in Mavs history to wear 24, which is actually pretty crazy. That's a relatively common number. Only 5 players have ever worn it. And the last 2 to wear it barely wore it. It's so weird.
I can't think of any 24s. I gave you the 25 that I could think of.
The last person to wear 24 was Richard Jefferson in his season. Before that, it was Pavel.
He threw down the craziest dunk that year.
Pavel Podkolzin wore it for a season. And then it was Hubert Davis, Jim Jackson, and Mark Aguirre was the first person to wear 24.
Oh, Aguirre. I should have remembered Aguirre being 24.
But why is no one wearing 24 in Dallas? That's a common number. No one's, maybe the Richard Jefferson dunk legacy, they can't live up to it. So no one's doing that. PJ Washington currently wears 25 for the Mavs as well. And we had Vince Carter wearing 25 for Dallas in his few years there too.
That was the one that was in my mind because I was just thinking Manu Ginobili recently just responded to a picture of Vince Carter hitting that game winner against the Spurs in that playoff game where the picture is Vince Carter like rising up for the shot and Manu Ginobili is in the defensive stance looking down at his shoes.
Wow.
like looking at Vince Carter's shoes.
It's so weird that like Vince Carter's played for so many teams, was around for so long, but like that is like one of those moments that you just remember. And I don't know why it's so like, I guess because he was like old and like he was nowhere near his prime, but he's hitting like playoff game winners. Like there's just like, well, that's random, but it's still Vince Carter. Maybe that's why. But yeah, that one always sticks in my mind. That's a weird one. Nick.
It was just a legendary series because the Mavs should have not been in that at all. It was like one of those crazy Carlisle coach series that you look back on and you're like, oh my God, like he must be a wizard. He got this. It was a 7-game series.
That's right. Because was that the one where the Spurs were like the 2 seed?
They were up there. I wasn't covering the team at the time, so
yeah. I'm pretty. Yeah, I think that was close enough to being right. But anyway, someone can fact check me if they want or not. I don't care. Nick, that brings us to the end of this Mavericks preview show. So, what are you cooking over at Locked On Mavs at the moment?
Yeah, Locked On Mavs still going 5 days a week throughout the offseason. We're talking about the big questions, like you mentioned, all those things that we mentioned today about this team. We're talking about. We're breaking it down. Me and Slightly Biased and Dana Larson over there on Locked On Mavs.
Go and check out Locked On Mavs for all of your Mavericks-based and Raccoon-based needs. Nick, thank you again for coming on and giving us the insight into the Mavericks.
And we're chasing down Locked On Fantasy for subs on YouTube.
No, go away. Don't listen to Locked On Mavs. Unsubscribe, unfollow it, or come here. Leave me alone. Do not do it. Nick, you never come back on. Slightly Biased. I'm going to hit him up for next. You are done. Thank you again for coming on, Nick. So you know what to do now. That is the end of the show. Hit the thumbs up. Hit the subscribe. I should put that up, shouldn't I? The little YouTube subscribe thing, just to remind you, in case you don't know how to do it or how to hit the thumbs up, I'll give you a little visual guide on the screen. Go do that now, guys. We are done here. Thank you so much for listening, everyone. See ya.